Recently on the Dungeons & Dragons official YouTube channel, they released a new video showing off the virtual tabletop. Now, I've heard a lot of talk in the community that's mostly negative, which really irks me, and it seems really dumb to get upset about this thing that all they've shown is really cool gameplay and these really cool things. Now, some of the criticism I think is fair from what I've seen, and I want to talk about what I think is fair criticism, dumb criticism, and maybe a bit of my own opinion thrown in there. So for anyone new to the channel, I'm Blzane. I make content here on YouTube, D&D, anime, the likes, alright? If you're into that kind of thing, hey, this is the place for you. Comment down below if you got any questions, subscribe if you like the channel, and let's get into it. Now, before I give you your rage bait and your things that you can go into the comments and yell and scream about and get mad at, I want to talk about some positives and some things that are pretty clear that I think can genuinely be so helpful for the D&D community. The first thing I want to talk about is simply the ease of access of this thing compared to stuff like Roll20 and Foundry. Roll20 and Foundry are great. They're amazing. They allow a virtual place for people to hang out, play D&D, and have a good time without needing to be over the board all the time or just purely use theater of mind. So it's great. But frankly, we have to be honest with each other. If you don't understand D&D as a whole, it's sometimes kind of rough to use, because if you don't understand what this check does or what to roll or what modifiers to add and things like that, it can't always do every bit of it for you, so you really still have to have such a grasp on it that it's really hard for new players to get in. Whereas this virtual tabletop seemingly is going to have tons upon tons of things that you can do. For one, it's just going to look better, and I think it's hard for a lot of people that haven't played role-playing games before to play just this flat 2D plane. For a lot of us, it's fairly simple, right? We like to use our imagination, we're comfortable with that, we're used to that, so for us this 2D plane is fine. We can vision it as this three-dimensional space. Not everyone has that built into their system. So the virtual tabletop allows just that and eases players into the idea of role-playing, because you can see your three-dimensional model character. You can see these monsters and how big they are in comparison to the buildings around you and your characters and even the NPCs walking around. Even things like line of sight can be really helpful. Sometimes when you're playing, if you have trouble visioning that three-dimensional space, it's pretty rough to understand floors and if you can or can't see something and things of that nature. This three-dimensional layer helps with that tenfold. It really lets you see these things. So overall, I think the virtual tabletop can really help new players get into the game, which maybe you hate playing with new players and that's fine, but having a larger community and having more people invested in playing typically only means good things. Now, if you haven't seen the video of the virtual tabletop yet, I'm going to have it playing here so you can kind of see what I'm talking about as I talk about it. Now, another thing I want to mention for this, while this one is a little more of a niche and is more of a personal thing, it seems like the ability to turn off the normal just kind of square gridded platform or pattern that you play on, you can have it be very open, which, yes, while things like Roll20 and stuff like that usually allow you to do so, where you can just place things wherever and it doesn't have to be locked onto the grid, this has a built-in system for it. It seems like when it comes to measuring your movement, measuring where you can and can't go, and that's really sick. On top of that, because we are in this space that is now not locked onto this grid pattern that typically is on things like Roll20 and Foundry to, help ease things in, the DM can place things anywhere. Right here, I'm going to show you a clip of the building burning down and the DM just placing fire tokens around, where now okay, you have to avoid this space. And you know what this really helps with too? Radiuses. Oh my goodness. Area of effect things can be such a pain sometimes when you use a gridded out area, because circles are not going to cover a square's perfectly. It's just not going to happen. So now, because of this system of movement and measuring, it gives you a much easier way to say, okay, well, this definitely hits your person, seeing as to where they are on the field, rather than just this gridded system. Now, this positive, again, is more of a solo positive, but, I think it's still fair to point out. Another thing that I want to discuss is something they mentioned in the video a little bit, or at least allude to, and that's the fact that we're probably going to have some pre-built things that you can run through. And through D&D, especially those that have been around for a while, you know that Wizards of the Coast and even third parties will release stories and adventures that you can run through almost as if it was similar to like a choose your own adventure book, which can be really nice, especially if maybe your DM is super busy and they just don't have time to do a full campaign right now. Or maybe your group has someone that's not super great at creating stories themselves, but is a great DM and at describing things. Well, this is perfect for them because you get a great story. This is going to provide that more than likely tenfold, because not only do you get the story that's already going to be built in that you can run and do that amazing thing, but it's gonna have these built-in visuals, right? Whereas usually if you're handcrafting your thing, you're gonna have your handcrafted dungeons and things you can run through. You're gonna have the playmats or whatever, all those cool things. But this is gonna have them pre-made, which is awesome. I think pre-made adventures have a chance to be super, super sick in this thing. Now, the last thing that I do want to point out here, and this kind of falls into the ease of access because it lets new players in a little easier when they're looking at it, but it's just the beauty of a three-dimensional space. Being able to take your character that's usually just a flat image and turn them into a three-dimensional figure that you get to move around and mess with is so, so cool. And yeah, we usually get that over the table, but you don't always get to be over the table. So this allows you to have that feeling of actually seeing your character in the space and seeing how truly big they are and how tall they are and how muscular they might be, or the opposite of how short they are and how scrawny they are compared to the world. These three-dimensional figures and three-dimensional look that you get on the world that you don't normally have is just honestly more appealing to the eye. And yes, you're gonna have your D&D purists that are, oh, that's not how they played it back in my day. Okay, so what, man? If this is how people want to enjoy it, and frankly, I believe this looks better than just using your flat 2D planes, then so be it, right? I think just overall, it just brings such a better look to it. Okay, now, because I want to be fair, and I want to mention both sides of this thing, I do want to talk about some negatives here, and I think a glaring negative is that this is owned and handled by Wizards of the Coast, who, at least as of recent, if you keep up with any D&D news, isn't on the best foot with its community right now, and tried to make some decisions that the community didn't really like, and they got a damn near instant, almost wholesale boycott on their hands, so they had to backtrack real fast. Now, I'm not going to sit here and allude, at least not at this part of the video, and guess as to what is going to happen and what that means, but I think it is fair to note that the fact that they own it is kind of just overall a negative, because it means that they hold a lot of power to do whatever they want with. Now, one thing that I personally don't see as a negative, because I'm all about moving forward and change and making things better than what they could be, but a negative I can see, and I will say for some people is going to be a very real one, is the loss of some of that tabletop feeling. With this virtual tabletop, as they're calling it, it definitely is starting to feel more and more like a video game, which again helps with ease of access, but for a lot of your D&D purists, and I won't say a lot, but at least a decent amount of your old heads, they're not going to like it, and they're going to see this as something infringing on what they feel is theirs and infringing on what they feel is right. And I will say, for new people coming in, if they're introduced to the virtual tabletop and they never get a sense of that actual over-the-table play, it might not feel the same for them. And it might end up being one of those things that, while they enjoy it, they don't enjoy it as much as they maybe could have. And again, while I don't think this one is a negative or really is that strong of a negative, it's a fair point that I've heard that I think is valid enough that I want to point it out. Now, with my near 100% positives for sure and 100% negatives for sure, granted, everything's due to change. They haven't released this thing yet, so it could be totally different by the time they release it. I want to talk about some things that are just theories that can make this either really good or really bad. And I think a lot of the major negatives tend to be on this side of things, of they haven't said anything about it one way or another, but track record and history as of recent isn't leading to such a good outcome. One of the biggest theoretical negatives actually directly stems from the assured negative that I had of the ownership is completely on Wizards of the Coast and the whole D&D brand. And the reason this is a big negative is it might be pricey. And I'm not talking just to use the virtual tabletop. We don't know if that's going to end up being free or not, but to use the assets. And this last video did try to make it sound positive in that anyone can make anything and they can just implant whatever they want and do it and go at it. there is a strong possibility it's not going to be as easy as going on to D&D Beyond and finding some cool homebrew weapon that you think is neat that you want to start using. It more than likely is going to be, oh, that's a really cool asset you created. We can now steal that and use it. Or maybe it lets people put assets up for sale, which is great for the creators, but it isn't very true to what D&D really was, which was that community of just sharing and someone creating something and everyone appreciating it for what it was. And while I love the idea and theory of a creator creating this asset and them putting it out there on some kind of like mini paid thing, it's probably not likely. And let's say they do create a market for these assets where a creator creates a really sick 3D model of a monster and puts it out there. You know what's going to happen? They're going to get a cut of what they earn off that. And what I mean by that is, let's say they put this monster out there for $10, and that's what you can buy this 3D model for. All Wizards of the Coast has to do is come in and say, all right, well, they'll pay $10, you'll get 8, and we'll get 2. Which doesn't sound miserable, but them just taking 20% for things they didn't create kind of sucks, and it feels like the creator should be getting a lot more, and the people shouldn't be having to pay more for just using this thing that they might have to pay for just to use. So, negative theories, this might be really pricey and might turn out to be a really scary money grab. Now, what I think is honestly a very big theoretical negative, because I don't see this happening, but I have seen people mention it being a possibility, is them converting to a almost purely online standpoint, in that they just kind of stop releasing physical books, they stop releasing physical assets and things of that nature, and it's just purely online. And if you want it in physical, you're going to have to print it or do something of the nature, copy it down in order to have it. Now, I don't see them doing this for one main reason, and that's the community outcry. While yes, from a business standpoint, it makes a lot of sense for them to do that because it's way cheaper for them to just create this digital thing that they can then reprint infinitely inherently and give to people, they probably won't, because as soon as they do that and they say, hey, here's our new rulebook, it's only online, absolutely no physical copies, there would assuredly be an outrage of people that maybe they're collectors and they want every single rulebook variation, or maybe it's friends and family that do still play over the board and they're going to need those physical copies and don't want to sit there with an iPad and have to scroll through and do that whole thing because it's a technology-free zone or whatever the case may be. So while again a possibility, I doubt it, but it is something to consider. Now, I'm going to quickly run through my theoretical positives because honestly they pretty much just counter argument and stem directly from the negatives. And that one, it might be completely free. This virtual tabletop might be free to play, and maybe you gotta purchase the books on there to use, which I think is understandable because if you wanted to play over the board, you should probably do that. Even though you can get them for free in other ways, you probably still should, but nonetheless, it might not be that expensive. And you know what? Their custom things that people make might also be free, and they might just let you implement whatever the heck 3D model you want to put in there. So, theoretical positive there is that. The other theoretical positive, Wizards of the Coast just stays true, and while their ownership is scary, maybe from this long outcry and this loud burst and attack that they received after trying to even just take away some of the custom stuff, they might not do it. They might realize, hey, this is a battle we cannot fight, and we need to just let them have this one. While it's not a likely positive, I'm gonna hold to hey, there's always a chance, right? And, for any of my negatives, obviously just swing them the opposite way, and there's the positive. Now, I know this has been a longer video than usual, but there was kind of a lot I wanted to talk about because I've seen so much negativity online for this thing that I just don't think is fair, because a lot of the negativity that people have isn't true or proven yet. But nonetheless, to kind of give my final take on it, I think overall this is going to be a very, very awesome, cool thing that we're going to have as D&D players. Can I be proven wrong? 100%. They could release some monetization model that's a subscription service that you have to pay $30 a month for, and it's just outrageous. Yeah, that's a real possibility, but I'm going to keep my hopes up. I'm going to tell myself, hey, this thing's going to be cool. Wizards of the Coast learned from their mistake of trying to take things away from players and their community that they really shouldn't, and maybe they provide this thing and they get a ton of love and really make up for it. At the end of the day, all I have to say is form your own opinions. Take what I have to say, go listen to some other creators, do your own research about it, don't just take what I say as the Bible, and that's why I mention a lot of other people's thoughts, because I think it's fair to mention all sides. Now, my thoughts personally, well, I've told you, and that's how I feel. And if you think I'm dumb and I'm a silly little goosehead, let me know down in the comments. Or maybe you think I'm based as fuck, and that's what you want to tell me too. Either way, just let me know. I respond to what I can in the comments, and I'm more than down to have some civil discourse in my Discord, which is also linked in the description. If you want to join, we can chat it up. But nonetheless, I hope y'all enjoyed, and I'll see you guys on the next one. Peace out.